I'm here today at the wonderful Young Israel of Lawrence-Cedarhurst, headed by the extraordinary Rabbi Ya'akov Trump. And today we are going to complete not only Masechta Chagiga, but the entire Seder Moed. Come join me for Transformative Daf.
Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi. Good evening. It is a pleasure to see everybody. Tonight is a special night in that we are on the meridian of crossing the end of Seder Moed in the Daf Yomi. So we're finishing up Maseches Chagiga, moving into Seder Noshem, and in lieu of that, instead of the short Dvar Torah that we usually learn between Mechamarim as we're covering the Sefer HaChinuch tonight, we're going to have the opportunity of hearing just a few minutes from a dear chaver of mine, Rabbi Dr. Daniel Friedman, who is joining us as part of an author of a book called the Transformative Daf. Rabbi Friedman has written, he holds Yadin from Gedalia Schwartz in Chicago, holds a PhD from the University of Alberta, and has been writing about something we can learn from the Daf, something special we can learn from the Daf in our own lives every single day. It's my greatest pleasure to welcome my chaver, Rabbi Friedman, to share a few moments.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Trump. What an honor to be here at Young Israel of Lawrence-Cedarhurst. Let's look at tonight's Daf. We're on Daf Chav Zayin of Chagiga. And I'd like to begin with a story. Rabbi Shmuel Golden, who writes Unlocking the Torah Text, actually on this week's Parashas Vayikra, once hosted a delegation of Korean evangelical pastors. Now, it's funny. Korea has the largest churches in the world. You can have 100,000 people attending church, one church, on a Sunday morning. These mega massive churches. But not only that, there's some weird craze going on. On top of that, they're also into Talmud. I've been contacted by a Korean Talmud school. I'm like, well, what's going on? I mean, are you Jewish? No, not Jewish. He's learned in yeshiva. This Rosh Yeshiva, I don't know if he calls himself a Rosh Yeshiva, this head of this Talmud school went to learn in yeshiva for a few months in Israel. So it's actually not so pasha that we can teach Torah Sheba'al Peh to non-Jews. Torah Shebechsav to Christians, according to the Rambam, not a problem. But Rabbi Golden is once hosting this delegation of evangelical pastors, and they say to him, so where's the altar? He says, what are you talking about? Well, the altar, where do you sacrifice the animals? Well, he says, well, we don't do that anymore. They're perplexed, so how do you achieve atonement? Let's look at today's Gemara. HaMizbeach. So we ended off yesterday's Gemara where we were discussing various impurities, and the Gemara gets to an issue of if the Mizbeach has this gold outside of it, maybe it is susceptible to Tumah. Nevertheless, says the Gemara, HaMizbeach eitz. It's called wood. This is a pasuk in Yecheskel. Sholosh amos kavaya. It was 3 amos tall. The arkai, and its length was 2 amos, 2 amos. Umiktza'osav, and its corners like the arkai v'kirosav eitz, and its length and its corners were made of wood. So we find that it's called wood, and therefore that's why it is not susceptible to tumah. Many of us familiar with the end of this quote, and he spoke to me and said, this is the table that is before Hashem. Wonderful, but there's a lack of congruency in this verse. Says the Gemara, Pasach b'mizbeach v'siyam b'shulchan. It called it first an altar, and then it called it a table. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Reish Lakish, Da'amri Tavayhu. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish both answered the question as follows: Bizman shebeis hamikdash kayam, and that when the Beis Hamikdash is around, then Mizbeach mechaper, the holy altar achieves atonement. Mechaper al Adam. Achshav shulchana shel Adam mechaper alav. But now, in the absence of the Beis Hamikdash, a person's table, dining table at home, that achieves atonement for you. Says Rashi, Shulchan mechaper alav ba'achnasas archin, when you invite guests. Now, I want to tell you, sometimes the transformative daf is easy to write because it's right there in front of us, like a Gemara like this. Sometimes it's a little more complicated, and one has to work and think through it. And this is something that we should all be doing the way we learn. But let's just discuss this idea that's brought to us at the end of the Gemara in Chagiga. The notion of how do we achieve atonement. The answer to the Rabbi Golden could have answered these evangelical pastors, actually, in fact, did in a certain sense, is our tables achieve atonement. How does that happen? How does that work? So first of all, Reb Gershon Henech Leiner, the Radzina, says that the way that it works is when you eat for the right reasons, and you take that nourishment, and you say, I'm going to use it for my avodas Hashem, my service of God, then you achieve the atonement through the food that you placed on your table. The problem is, it's not immediate. I mean, if you do the right thing with the food, then it'll happen. Rashi's solution is actually much easier. It happens immediately. If you have guests at your table automatically becomes that mizbeach. Your table automatically becomes that source of atonement. The Torah Mincha goes on to explain that there are various ways that we achieve atonement with material and spiritually needy people, inviting them to our homes, not just our mates. Does I say it in South Africa? Mates? I'm Australian, right? I don't have a good accent like Rabbi Trump. It's watered down a little. But when we invite our buddies to our table, that's nice. But when we invite those who really need to be there, spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, the single in shul who doesn't get invited, the older couple who have lost contact with their children who are not calling on them, that's when we achieve that atonement. That's when we really make something out of our personal mizbeach. Now, to bring it home, Rabbi Golden actually says that the truth is, it's a bit of a misnomer when we think that you can only achieve atonement with karbanos in the Beis HaMikdash if you think the animal is there on the altar and it's being sacrificed to God. He says it didn't always happen that way. Think about the Korban Pesach. Korban Pesach, you shechted it in the Beis HaMikdash, you took it home to your mizbeach at home, and you ate it there. Essentially, what were you doing? What made it a korban then? You invited God to your table. You invited God for supper. So my blessing to you all is, may you every day invite God for supper, make your dining table a mizbeach, achieve atonement, achieve great things. May you have material blessing, spiritual blessing, and blessing throughout your lives. Wishing you all a transformative day.